Okay, you guys, let's cool down with some finishing techniques. We're going to take a look at some finishing for the bead wire as well as the nylon thread. But let's take a look at this bead wire first. So I have a little bracelet that I've strung here, and again, note the importance of a spacer bead, and also note how I've used just cellophane tape here on the ends, so when I pick this piece up to measure it and do all of that kind of stuff, these beads don't end up on the floor, because as you and I both know, a bead's natural habitat is on the floor, so we have to do everything we can to corral them. So make sure that your tape is nice and tight so you don't have an accident and drop these guys off your strand. So I'm going to start by closing off one end of this necklace, and I'm just going to let the beading wire kind of rip through the side of the tape like so. And I'm going to start by putting on a little crimp tube. And then this is kind of my secret weapon, you guys. This is a little wire guard. And I love the way a wire guard looks on the end of a necklace or a bracelet. I feel like it just kind of hides that beading wire and makes everything just look really, really nicely professionally finished. Now, before I send that wire, that beading wire back through my crimp tube, I need to attach my clasp so it sits right in my wire guard. And can you guys see that little wire guard also makes it kind of an automatic size, that loop at the end, so I'm not making it too tight. That's another good reason to use a wire guard. Now I'm going to slide that crimp tube up. I'm going to pinch that wire guard closed a little bit with my fingers. Now I'm going to pick up my crimping tool, and I'm going to come in. And one thing you guys want to remember here is I have my beading wire laying side by side under the crimp tube so it's not crossed. That's going to allow me to make a nice firm crimp. I'm going to come in, and I can turn this to the side so you guys can see what's happening here. See in the crimping portion, the back end of my plier here, how I apply pressure. And can you see now how my crimp tube has a nice little a little valley in it right there. Now, my second step is I'm going to take the other part of my crimping plier. Let me position it here, just like so. And can you see that little valley that I've made? It's just right in the top. I could see it there. Now I'm going to come in with my tool and give it a little hug, a little squeeze, just like that. Nice and firm. And you can see I folded that crimp tube in half. But the cool thing with this crimping tool is I can come in with the tips and also give it a little extra love, like one last little squeeze to make sure that everything is nice and closed and tight. Now, I know that some of you may be a little shocked at what I'm going to do next, but you know what? A crimp tube is either crimped tightly or it's open. If your crimp tube is tightly crimped, it's going to stay in place. So what I do is I get my wire cutter and I grab the end of my beading wire with my plier and I push that cutter all the way up to the crimp tube. Can you see that? And I give it a cut. Now there's no little end to scratch your wrist or scratch your neck when you're wearing it. So that's one side. Now I'm just going to come in and I'm going to do the other. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put my crimp tube on. Let me get another one here. I'm going to slide that guy on. I'm going to slide on my wire guard. And the trick to effectively using beading wire, you guys, is that you don't want to make your piece too tight. It needs to have some movement. So this little trick that I'm going to show you next is really going to help you get the exact right amount of slack in the piece. So can you see here, I've got my wire guard, I've gone back through my crimp tube just as I did before. But now I'm going to close my clasp. Can you see that? Now when I pull on my wire, my beading wire here, See how it just snugs right up, but it's leaving me the right amount of slack in the piece. If I crimp it while it's just one long piece, I may crimp it too tightly and it'll be hard to close. So I'm just gonna come in and crimp this the exact same way as I did before. My first little channel there, I come in and crimp it tightly, and then I turn it to the side and close it. And finish off with a last little hug. And one more time, I just come right up against that with my nice sharp wire cutters. Can you see that there? And I clip it away. And there you have a piece that's perfectly crimped and has the perfect amount of slack in it. Now, let's take a look at thread, because thread is a little bit different than the beading wire. And I want to share with you a couple of tips on how to close that. Now, here's a necklace that I have completed, the one that we looked at the beginning of the show. I want to turn it around so you guys can see what's going on in the back. Can you see how I've got a bead that I've created a toggle for? And I've strung along, I've put all of my strands through a bead that has a large hole here. I've split them, gone through the bead hole and back down through this large hole bead. So it's really important to have a bead that has a nice big hole so you can get all of those threads back through it. Then I tied a knot, a little square knot, right over left, left over right, right underneath here, and I have adhered it or glued it together with my clear nail polish. And I've let that knot dry, and then I clip with my thread shears, my little thread shears, I clip those ends right away. On this second side, after I create the toggle, I do the same thing here. I split my threads, I've gone through these seed beads, back through my big hole bead, and again, right underneath here is my square knot. I'm going to bring this down in front of me so you can really see how this closure comes together. We've got our bead, we've got our loop, and it just sits perfectly as a button and loop closure. You can also use a ready-made clasp if you are so desire to do so. And you can see here with this ready-made clasp, see how I've brought all of my threads together in a cone? And what I did was I made a little wire-wrapped loop here, and that little wire-wrapped loop, my threads at the end of my necklace just tie around that little wire-wrapped loop, and then I draw that wire up through the cone, and I wire wrap that wire right onto my ready-made clasp. And it's a nice, sturdy, easy way to get all of these strands together. Cones are really fantastic. The other thing I wanted to show you is the closure on this tassel. Now, this tassel, you can see, I've strung some beads up. It's kind of hard to see because the knot is pretty tiny, but I've tied just a simple overhand knot, just like so. And I can use my pliers to kind of help me walk that knot right up against my bead and tighten everything up. And then I add my little clear nail polish to that, and then I'll use my thread scissors to clip it away after it's dry. All right, you guys, I've given you a big workout today. You've learned so much, and I can't wait to see what you do with all of these great beading techniques.